Welcome back to IELTS Speaking 7.5. This is Lesson 5 and we're talking about Advanced Part 1 Answers. Again, I repeat, although this is IELTS Speaking 7.5, it's for anyone that wants to go beyond a 6 because it's a big step to get from a 6 to a 6.5, from a 6.5 to a 7, and even bigger from a 7 to a 7.5. So we're being ambitious here. So, all of you are fairly advanced, and you want to get beyond a 6. We're going to try and make it easy. So, welcome back. I'm Oliver. We're going to go straight in this time. Straight into it. Why are we doing this? Well, let me recap very quickly. Why bother prepare and train for Part 1? Remember, it's a perfect way to train yourself. It's perfect. There's so many, there's hundreds of Part 1 questions, but not that many question types. Basically, Part 1 questions cover all the grammar you're going to need to use and know in the English language and in succinct, manageable questions and answers. 2, it's a great warm-up in the test itself. Go into the test, do a great Part 1, your score will go up, you'll be confident, you'll do a better Part 2 and 3. Fact. 3, you can raise your score with a strong Part 1. Part 1 is a third of the speaking test. The examiner does not forget the first part of the test, Part 1. The examiner does think about it and factor that into the final score. So you can raise your score significantly with a strong Part 1. So it covers a huge range of different topics, basically all the tenses in the English conversational language. It's a great training ground for getting high scores. And the things I teach you, you can use in all parts of the test as well. So, my Part 1 lessons: give grammatically correct extended answers. Give advanced, sophisticated answers. This does not mean overly complicated language. It means using language in the right places flexibly. Natural, educated, native speaker lexical chunks, word groups correctly. So Part 1 is a foundation, a preparation, a build-up to Part 2 and 3. Follow me in this course and you will see exactly why and how. So you must do active listening and notes. Pause, rewind this video. Actively listen, make notes. Keep your notes, write your own answers, record your answers back to you. Don't memorize whole answers, don't. But do memorize lexical chunks and word groups and learn to use them in multiple different answers and answer types. You can practice. Let's get going. But first, remember to pay special attention to my pronunciation as a native speaker in general. My sentence stress, my pauses, the longer, the short, the very short pauses, the music of my language. Note down lexical chunks and word groups. Go back, rewind, listen, re-listen, write your own notes, study your notes. Very important. So, we're going to go straight into how would you improve. Common question type in Part 1. Useful language that can come up in Part 2 and Part 3, suggesting improvements or solutions to things very common in the speaking test and incorporates lots of useful language. So, how would you improve the transport in your country? Maybe even pause the video here and think about what you might say. How would you improve the transport in your country? Okay, this is my answer. How would you improve the transport in your country? Well, firstly, it must be pointed out that the transport systems in China have improved significantly in the past decades. When I was a child, trains were slow, old, dirty and overcrowded, and it was a real hassle to get tickets. Now we have high-speed trains with great facilities. They're spotlessly clean and amazingly efficient. What I would improve, however, are the buses. They're often run down, in need of repair, uncomfortable and inefficient. I'd have them completely revamped. I'd also suggest the authorities rebuild the roads between country towns. Again, it's a long answer. Yes, you probably won't get time in the speaking test in part 1 to give an answer this long. But I'm just giving you lots of language, and remember, you can use this across the whole test. So, let me be honest. Like I've just said, the examiner will interrupt you. The examiner won't likely give you time to give an answer this long. Though it's only around 25 seconds, the examiner will interrupt you. The examiner has to finish part 1 within 4 and 5 minutes. So don't be offended or upset when you're interrupted, because the examiner needs to manage his or her own time for the test. So, in fact, you may only get time to say something as short as this. Well, firstly, it must be pointed out that the transport systems in China have improved significantly in the past decades. When I was a child, trains were slow, old, dirty, and overcrowded, and it was a real hassle to get tickets. Thank you. Let's move on to talk about... You? What? I haven't finished my answer yet. Now, this is going to happen. Don't be offended. The examiner will cut in like this. Thank you, let's move on to talk about. And you might be lucky if they say thank you. So don't be offended. Don't be demotivated. Just accept that they're happy with what you've said and they need to keep to the time. Now, maybe you'd say, before you were interrupted, I'd improve the buses. They're often run down, in need of repair, uncomfortable and inefficient. I'd have them completely revamped. I'd also suggest the authorities rebuild the roads between... Thank you. Let's move on to talk about flowers. You. Why? I haven't finished my answer yet. Again, completely normal. It's going to happen. Be ready for this. Don't be demotivated. Don't be discouraged. Accept it. Move on. Right, so don't worry. In these preparation lessons, I'm going to give you longer answers you will likely have time to say than you will likely have time to say in part 1. Study, prepare, train ourselves with longer, rich language is the best way to practice. So don't be surprised if the examiner cuts you off. You do not lose any points if you don't finish what you wanted to say. Remember this. Right, how would you improve the transport in your country? Listen to where I pause, the words I stress, and the rhythm of my phrasing. Well, firstly, it must be pointed out that the transport systems in China have improved significantly in the past decades. When I was a child, trains were slow, old, dirty, and overcrowded, and it was a real hassle to get tickets. Now we have high-speed trains with great facilities. They're spotlessly clean and amazingly efficient. What I would improve, however, are the buses. They're often run down, in need of repair, uncomfortable and inefficient. I'd have them completely revamped. I'd also suggest the authorities rebuild the roads between country towns. So the logic here, let's look at the logic of this, because it's a slightly longer answer. Logic is important. How do I answer the question? In fact, I begin by talking about the things that have already been improved, if you've noticed. Why? It sounds natural, spontaneous, relevant, and honest. In fact, most of my answer focuses on these improvements, the things that have already been improved. I then round off by saying the one thing I would improve, the buses. I then go ahead and suggest 2 improvements. So you can see I've answered this in a slightly different way. And there are many ways you could answer this for a high score, many, many ways. But there is a certain logic to each way. And this particular logic, which I chose today, already talks about the things that have been improved, then goes on to talk about the thing which I think should be improved, and then suggests improvements. It's a nice way of doing it. So, introducing our answer. Firstly, it must be pointed out that the transport systems in China have improved significantly in the past decades. Firstly, simple, effective, introductory word to a list of things. It must be pointed out. It's undeniable. This is when you want to say something that you really feel is so important it deserves a mention. It's a very native speaker thing to say. You felt that the transport systems in your country have developed a lot. So before criticising and suggesting improvements, you want to tell the examiner, well, you know, it's got to be said, it can't be denied. The transport systems in my country have really improved a lot. It sounds native, it sounds intelligent, it sounds human, it sounds natural. Then I go on to say they have improved significantly in the past decades. Have improved significantly. So present perfect tense with period of time with a nice adverb. Have improved significantly in the past decades. Have improved significantly in the past decades. Talking about something that happened in the past, went on for a period of time, and has an ongoing positive effect. Have improved significantly in the past decades. How else could we say this? How else could we say this? Practice different ways of saying the same or similar things, so you can use them in the test in different places. Firstly, it must be pointed out that transport systems in China have improved significantly in the past decades. You could say, to begin with, I'd like to mention that I feel it can't be denied nobody would deny that. I think everybody would agree that. There's lots of different ways you can say this kind of introductory statement. To begin with, I'd like to mention that I feel it can't be denied that, nobody would deny that, I think everybody would agree that, etc. 2. When I was a child, comparing the past to now. So, when I was a child, trains were slow, old, dirty, overcrowded, and it was a real hassle to get tickets. When I was a child, trains were. Get the verb forms right. If you say trains, say were, don't say was. Get it right. A basic error will keep you at a 6 or below. Slow, old, dirty, overcrowded. Wow, that's 4 adjectives in a row. Slow, old, dirty, overcrowded. Maybe too many, but it's a good way to practice the language, is to train yourself with multiple adjective combinations like this. And it was a real hassle to get tickets. Great native speaker collocation we always use. It was a real hassle. Real hassle 2 plus verb. It was really hard to get tickets. It was a real pain to get tickets. It was a real hassle to get tickets. A real hassle. A real pain. A difficulty. Good native speaker phrase. Idiomatic expression. Score will go up for lexical resource. Right, it. I'm going to mention this because it's called an anticipatory it in grammar terms, and we use it quite a lot actually. Learn whole phrases with it rather than trying to understand the mechanics of the grammar. It must be pointed out that transport systems in China have improved significantly. It was a real hassle to get tickets. It must be said that. It can't be denied that. It was a real hassle to. It was really difficult to. So it refers to a situation. It's called an anticipatory it because the it is at the front of the sentence. It was a real hassle. It must be said that. It can't be denied that. Look at these structures here on this slide. I suggest you pause this slide, take a note of the grammar pattern structures I've written there. More examples you can use. Just use these examples flexibly in many questions if you like. Memorize them. What patterns of grammar do you see? Make a note of this. Pause the slide after I've finished speaking and look at the patterns. Copy the patterns. It was really hard to pass the exam. It was a real hassle to get online in the 1990s. It was almost impossible to find foreign restaurants then. It is a real shame the buses still have not been improved. It must be said that the air quality has improved. It's obvious that they're making efforts to be greener. It's clear that they've been making efforts to be greener. It's obvious. It's clear that. It's obvious that. It's clear that. Good sentences. You can, again, memorize these. Understand them. Use them in many answers. How would you improve the transport in your city? I'm going to read the bit in bold now. Now we have high-speed trains with great facilities. They're spotlessly clean and amazingly efficient. Now we have high-speed trains with great facilities. They're spotlessly clean and amazingly efficient. I'm still talking about the things which have improved. A few things that have already got better. Now we have high-speed trains with great facilities. They're spotlessly clean and amazingly efficient. So, high-speed trains with great facilities. Spotlessly clean. A standard collocation. Adverb modifying adjective. Spotlessly clean. Learn the collocation. These words always go together. Amazingly efficient. Adverb modifying adjective. Again, it's amazingly efficient. We usually always modify our adjectives with an adverb. Sounds very native. Vary your use. You can build in collocations like these two, which will give you a higher score. Adverbs modifying adjectives. Spotlessly clean, amazingly efficient, really worn out, incredibly well organized, terribly confusing, ridiculously expensive, highly effective, utterly useless. Learn these. They're standard collocations. Write short phrases of your own. This is a task now, so pause the slide, get your paper out. Write short phrases of your own using these collocations to describe things that you have experience with. What kind of things do these collocations of adverbs modifying adjectives describe from your experience? Okay, how would you improve the transport in your country? Let's look at the adjectives. Slow, old, dirty, overcrowded, spotlessly clean, amazingly efficient, often run down, in need of repair, uncomfortable, inefficient. See how many adjectives I've used in the whole answer. The answer as a whole has a lot of adjective use in there. Adjectives are very, 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 very common in spoken English for native speakers. And none of these adjectives are very complicated. It's just how I use them in a rhythmic sense and using them flexibly and correctly. Problems and conditions. Let's talk about this. Good and bad conditions. Adjectives of conditions and convenience, we can call them. Now we have high-speed trains with great facilities. They're spotlessly clean and amazingly efficient. So trains were slow, old, dirty, and overcrowded. But now they're spotlessly clean and amazingly efficient. They're often run down, in need of repair, uncomfortable and inefficient. That's how I describe the buses. Run down, in need of repair, uncomfortable, inefficient. So we've got lots of expressions we can use. Most of them are adjective expressions for conditions and convenience, both bad and good conditions, useful in many, many, many answers to many questions in the IELTS speaking test, and also useful to incorporate in your part 2 and 3. So let's look at a table. Let's organize these into a table so you can see. So we've got a list of things to describe inefficiency, which is usually describing processes, types of processes and services maybe, and disrepair, objects and equipment. Let's look at inefficiency of processes and services. Inefficient, ineffective, slow, confusing, unreliable, impractical. Adjectives to describe inefficiency. Disrepair, physical objects and equipment. In disrepair, in need of repair, in a bad state, old and run down, broken or damaged, worn out. So you can develop these lists. Get a piece of paper again, pause the slide, add more. Make sure they're fairly common adjectives that we use, not some strange or obscure academic vocabulary. All of these words here are very normal and common in native speaker conversation. Objects, machines, and equipment. Let's look at some examples of the things these adjectives might describe. Services and processes, for example, an online ticket system, a train or railway network, a smartphone app, a hotel check-in, customer services, a restaurant service. Objects and equipment, a railway or bus station, a train, a car or a bus, a phone, an iPad, a tablet, a building, a house, a structure, a road can be worn out, for example. Sports equipment or facilities, broken, damaged, in need of repair. Clothes, shoes, books, furniture. So, we've got two groups of adjectives. Inefficiency adjectives for processes and adjectives for bad conditions for objects or equipment. Examples. Practice writing sentences just like mine. Again, the end of the slide, pause the video, get a piece of paper, practice writing sentences just like this. The station is old and run down. The running track is worn out. The buses are inefficient and expensive. The tennis courts are in disrepair. The customer service is slow and inefficient. The sports facilities are in need of repair. The underground system is confusing. The online ticket app is unreliable. So, how would you improve the transport in your country? That's the question, and finally at the end I answer it. I'd have them completely revamped. I'd have them completely revamped. I'd also suggest the authorities rebuild the roads between country towns. I'd also suggest the authorities rebuild the roads between country towns. Suggesting improvements. Changes you would make, or I would make. I would buy plus ing. I would improve my apartment by putting pictures on the walls. See the words in bold, see the structures. I'd make my living room cozier by buying a new modern sofa. I'd buy plus ing. I'd make my living room cozier by buying a new modern sofa. I'd improve my flat by getting a new wardrobe. I'd improve my flat by getting a new wardrobe. Look at these structures. Great structure to use. You're going to get a good score with grammar and lexical resource. Suggested improvements continue. Changes you'd suggest other people make. I suggest that the government improve the air quality by restricting the traffic. Whoa, seems complicated, but not really. Just copy the structure, copy the pattern correctly. I suggest that the government improve the air quality by restricting the traffic. I think that the school authorities should improve security by building a wall. I believe they should make the city more attractive by planting more trees. Copy the structure, get the grammar right, make sure it's consistent. You can use this structure in so many different answers. Let's talk about the passive a little bit now. I'd have something done. So when you get or suggest someone else do something to improve or repair something, you're using this kind of passive. It's actually called a service passive in some grammar books. I'd have the office decorated. Have something done. I'd have plus something plus past participle. I'd have the office decorated so it will be nicer to work in. I'd have a new bathroom installed. I'd get the roof fixed. I'd have the running track cleaned and modernized. I'd improve the office by having it decorated. I'd improve the office by having it decorated. I call this a mix at the bottom. I'll show you why. Mix? What does that mean? I'd improve the office by having it decorated. By having plus object plus past participle. I'd improve my house by having a new bathroom installed. I'd improve the building by having the roof fixed. So I've actually combined the two structures I've just taught you, or just revised with you, into one different structure. I'd improve the building by having the roof fixed. I'd improve the sports facilities by having the running track repaired and modernized. So these are great sentences. They're brilliant, actually. They're very, very high-scoring sentences, and they sound really natural and really native. The result of the improvement, let's talk about that. We can end by saying what the result is. Having a carpet fitted would make my room more beautiful and warmer. So we've got a construction here which expresses the result. Putting up a few pictures on the wall would make my dorm more attractive. Installing a new kitchen would make life more convenient. Buying a new sofa would make my living room more cozy. So these past 4 or 5 slides, you've got a lot of cool structures here, great structures for improving, for showing really advanced English. But make sure you practice them so you don't get them wrong, and then sort of that will affect your grammar score. Make sure you get the structures right, whichever one you choose. So the result of an improvement, you could also add a result or a solution, a final solution to what you're trying to say. I would suggest improvement phase plus, so my university would be a warmer place to be. So my dorm would be more attractive. So my living room would be cozier. So my life in my city would be more comfortable. So life in my city would be more comfortable. So object place would be plus a comparative adjective. Again, adjectives just keep coming back. We use them a lot. Note, important note, you really need to practice these, because it's very important to practice what we've covered today, because the structures in the lesson are not that easy, or at least they're easy to get wrong, especially when you're in the heat of the moment in a speaking test. They require practice in context to be automatic when you're speaking, so you've got to practice them, and you do that by writing lots of examples. Please make notes of all these points, especially the past few slides. Incorporate them all in your answers of your own. Write them down, record them, check them, practice speaking them. Very important. I want these to become automatic for you, because that's what will make you sound more native. Look at the logic. Remember these steps. They're suggested steps. You could use many different logical steps, but just be aware of the logic. It's just a suggestion. Say what's good about the thing. Say what's bad about it. Say how to improve it. Say what the result of the improvement would be. Again, this is a part 1 lesson, but actually this is really good stuff for a part 2 and 3, because you might be discussing in part 3 improvements to a system in your country, improvements to education, improvements to the environment, improvements to the transport system, questions about recommendations and improvements and what people should do to make things better are very, very common. Very common in part 3 as well, and this is great language to incorporate. So remember this. This can be really used in part 3. Don't just think, oh, these are just part 1 lessons. They're not really. Everything here can be used in multiple places in the test. Right, a task now. I'd like you to do this after the class. Think about problems with the following things: your town, transport in your country, your university or your workplace. Think about things you would do to improve these, and what would the results of the improvements be. Write these things down. So, think of 6 problems with things. When you've done that, when you've done the previous task, this is another task. Think of 6 problems with things. Organize your thoughts in a table on paper like this. Draw this table on a big sheet of white paper. I keep saying this. Lots of paper. Problems, suggested improvements, results of improvements. Problems, suggested improvements, results of improvements. Make loads of notes. Generate lots of ideas. Put them together into answers following the structures that we've been covering today. So, task, write and speak answers. So when you've done those tasks, do this one. After the class, do the following. Would you do anything to improve your town or city? What would you suggest doing to improve the transport systems in your country? Is there anything you'd like to see improved about your university? So, write multiple answers to each of these questions. Write them, check them, record them, evaluate them, correct them, practice. Thank you very much. That's the end of Lesson 5, Part 1 lessons, but again, answers and structures applicable throughout the entire speaking test and in any conversational English context that you might be in. Thank you very much.